Hello, everyone. I'm Meredith, and welcome to Conversations with Friends. And tonight, joining me is a seasoned journalist. And when you hear about her background, you're going to be really impressed. Who has, though, been called kind of not away from her journalism, but adding to her work as a journalist to really try to help improve the lives of people who are in prison in Florida. Kathie Klarreich is the founder and the executive director of Exchange for Change. And it's a very unique writing program where, again, she works with people who are in prison for them to really get a sense of their lives, where they've been and where they're going. And it's quite amazing, you're going to see. So, Kathie, I'm delighted to get to interview you and learn more about the program, which is, as I say, it's pretty incredible. And one of the things that I feel is that there's a lot of this going on in society, right? I mean, in terms of people writing, people journaling, but as far as I understand, you were probably among the first, if not the first, to think about the lives of these people who are incarcerated and to think about their lives and how their lives can change through writing. So maybe could you explain that a bit?
Well, first of all, thanks so much for inviting me onto the show, Meredith. I appreciate it. And I think it's interesting. I mean, I would love to take credit for being a trailblazer in this field of working with incarcerated writers, and I'm not. And I think the fact that we don't know about these programs speaks to the fact that the Department of Corrections has done a very good job of keeping the incarcerated population isolated from our communities. So we are certainly unique in South Florida in terms of what we do of offering courses inside, but we're not unique in the United States, for example. There are prison programs all across the country, whether it's higher education in prison or arts therapy or a lot of religious programs, but there are a lot of people who are going into prisons, recognizing that the population that is incarcerated, 2/3 of them will be coming back out. And unless we do something with the time that they're in, we have so many restrictions and barriers that they face coming out that their chance of succeeding are drastically reduced. So our thinking going in is let's figure out how they can use their time more effectively and offer better communication skills while they're inside.
So why don't we quickly just take a look and see some of the experiences that your students have had in prison, because it's moving.
5 hours or more, I had to pray 5 times a day, no less. Laying around was not allowed. If I did, I would get punished.
I awoke last night, or so it did seem, from something so strong, I thought it a dream. Art transforms.
I've waited for this moment without wanting to wait for it. Now they're waiting on me, and I'm sure they'll be here soon.
These messed up, battered wings of mine can take me so damn far, beyond the planets, the sun, the moon, the most distant little star.
Writing transforms.
All I cared about was myself. I never helped anyone. Why should someone help me?
Exchange for Change teaches writing that transforms.
Just to see that says it all, doesn't it? It says, it shows what it is that they are taking from the program. So can we get into what happens when you begin to write about yourself and your life after you have been through a lot? I mean, these people's lives are, I know they have some pretty heavy, pretty intense stories to share.
It's so interesting, Meredith. I haven't seen that video in a while. And all of those, well, the 4 students that were there, the first one was transferred from Dade Correctional several years ago and is transferred back to South Florida at another institution, became our student again. The second one is still writing, Michael, he's still writing. The third person who spoke became our prison poet laureate, and I want to talk about that program. but he became the prison poet laureate because the fourth student who spoke is really emblematic of the transformation that can take place from our program. So that particular individual, his name is Lewis, came into our program having just gotten his GED. So he'd been incarcerated for more than a decade and had never really taken his education seriously. He got his GED, we started teaching in the institution, and he's like, okay, I got my GED, I'm kind of interested in learning to write. And he came to the program with a shaky sense of confidence in his own writing ability. So we would give him an assignment and he would write a couple sentences and he would get positive feedback. And then he started to write paragraphs. And then he started to write pages. And then he started to do spoken word poetry. And we offered poetry slams. So those of you who don't know spoken word poetry, they're contests. So he actually, the second time that he entered the contest, he won. So already like his transformation skyrocketed. He unfortunately got sick and he ended up passing away. But in his honor, we created the Prison Poet Laureate. So it's called the Luis Hernandez Prison Poet Laureateship. And the third speaker that you saw in that video became the first Prison Poet Laureate. We are now on our second Prison Poet Laureate. And the idea is that they speak for the incarcerated population. And it goes along with our twofold mission, which the first one is to bring these educational opportunities inside. And then the second is to bring the voice of the incarcerated out to the public. So creating the Prison Poet Laureateship is one way that we do that.
I actually did hear about it on NPR, I think long before we talked a few months ago or something. And again, that I was so touched by it and what it's done, for him and his life. So something happens though in this writing process. And again, I'm comparing it to people who are into journaling these days and writing about their lives and their own personal memoirs. Could we say that there is a healing that actually can take place? And it doesn't matter how talented you are. Something happens when you get that out, the suffering.
Absolutely. I mean, when you think about the prison environment, it is oppressive. It takes away your identity. You become a number. You are forgotten, right? Because you're physically removed from society. And you're not meeting new people, right? The only new people that you're meeting are new people that come into the system. We come in with the idea that they're in the classroom as students. So education is a human right. And we offer them the opportunity to become individuals and have their voice heard, recognized, appreciated. And that can only have a positive effect on your own self-image, right? Because if you spend 24 hours a day being berated and referred to as a number or being called, inmate or felon or convict, right? And all of a sudden, you start to find your voice through writing, you start to think about yourself differently. So we don't come in as counselors or therapists, but a byproduct of people journaling, writing, being heard is that it is extremely therapeutic and offers another way of resolving personal and interpersonal conflict.
So it's really, the way I see it is, it's about self-healing. You give them the tools to get out the suffering. And I imagine that most people that are incarcerated have been through some pretty heavy times long before. They wouldn't be there. I'm sure they've come from families in trouble. They've come from violent lives, things that they couldn't really, I want to say it wasn't their fault to begin with, where they were born, who were they were born into, right? I mean,
yeah,
they've had a lot to deal with. I'm not saying all, but most of them, would you say?
Yeah, well, I don't have a percentage, but I can give you an anecdote. So, probably 6 years ago or so, a group of veterans who were also our students inside came to me and said, Kathie, would you teach a course on PTSD, because, you know, a lot of us are vets and have suffered PTSD. And I said what I just said earlier, I'm not a therapist. We can do some writing that can respond to some prompts that might help you tell your story and self-heal. And at the end of the course, I said to them, you know, it's so interesting, you guys, none of you wrote about your war experiences. You all wrote about past traumas. And anyone who is actually in prison has been traumatized because you're removed from everything that is familiar to you. So we ended up leaving the title of writing on trauma and restricting it to vets and opening it up to the general population. And so the course is extremely popular, and we're offering it this semester, and we've switched the name, and it's called the Trauma Toolbox. And we're teaching it at a reentry center where people will be getting out. And the idea is, let's give you some tools so that when you get out, you won't be triggered by the same things that perhaps caused you to commit whatever crime you committed that got you inside in the first place.
So again, that's a way to help them get out of this. It's really a vicious cycle, because if they don't change, then when they get out, right? When
They could be triggered again.
And so I'm thinking, for those people that really aren't sensitive, you know, to the suffering that many of these people have had to endure, people out there, you know, in society, they feel, you know, they did something terrible, they should, you know, let them stay locked up. I mean, I'm thinking, would your answer be, it's going to affect you eventually? It can, because it's going to affect all of our society unless there is change.
Absolutely. I mean, we are one community, and, you know, this, I'm not the first person to coin this phrase, but, you know, we don't want to be labeled as the worst thing that we ever did. And it is in no way to minimize the impact of a victim. Right? Many of these men and women committed crimes that left a lot of damage in society and to their victim. That said, can we not look at who they are today, right? So we have some of the most repressive sentencing laws in the country in Florida. We have no parole. So if you committed a crime after I don't want to say the year because I'm going to get it wrong, but after a certain period of time, which was like 20 or 25 years ago, you cannot get parole. So if you get a life sentence, that means you will never get out. Half of our students have life sentences, and the men and women that I know in my classroom are the kind of people that I would like to sit at a dinner table with and have a conversation and introduce to my friends. So the problem we have in this state is that we don't give people second chances, and we go with these stereotypes. So a big part of our program is to try and reduce the stereotypes and get people to see them as individuals as they are today, not as the person who committed the crime.
So it's all about change. And that's the name of your organization, you know, Exchange for Change. So you're, you know, such a proponent of the change can happen to anyone, but they do need some support. They need help, which is what you're giving to them. So Kathie, what is it like for you to, you know, have founded this program in Florida, and you're running the program? And I want to talk about also the people that help you, assist you, because you have quite a team of young writers, right, that are working with you. So, but just tell me what it's like for you to see this kind of transformation take place in prisons.
That's funny. I got emotional when you were asking the question, Meredith, because I don't get asked that question very much. It's been profound. When I started this, I had no idea that it would evolve into what it is today. I started with one class of 17 students back in 2014. And by the time the pandemic shut us down, we were running 33 classes. We reached over 1,000 students. We trained over 100 facilitators. We're back up and running now with 18 classes this semester. Oof. So you can imagine, I've met a lot of people, and each one has a story. And it's, you know, even when I was a journalist and writing about people, it was a different kind of thing because I didn't know their stories, many of them, as intimately as I know some of the stories of the writers, because they're writing their lives, and I see them interact. And I also, you know, it's been 8 years. That's why seeing that video in the beginning of the show is like reminded me of how far so many of these people have come, and yeah, that we can all change. And I'm not I'm not saying this lightly, but I think my life has changed as much, if not more, from the exposure that I've gotten and the humanity that I've seen inside, and how so many of them have touched my life and made me a much better person.
That's amazing to hear that. And what I picked up from you a few months ago, I mean, I've known you for a long time, but when we were talking, I picked up on that. I felt that energy of the excitement that you have. And I think what it has to do with is when you know that you're able to contribute to society and do something. And to me, that's what's so important, that we find our passion or our purpose. You know, it has to be meaningful purpose to me, you know, something where you do feel, gee, you know, I am making a difference. Maybe not as big as you're doing or as, you know, powerful as what you're doing or empowering as what you're doing, but it should be something, because then when you go to sleep at night, you feel, you know, very satisfied. And that's what I feel. I mean, I'm sure too, it's tough though, because you, like you say, that a big percent of them, they're never going to get out, right? Is that what you're saying? If there's no parole, or they'll never, or they will get out eventually, they won't.
They will not get out. And so that's the emotional toll. And I think there's a couple things in there. One is that you recognize that because of the way our system is set up, people will spend the rest of their lives and will die in prison, knowing that they would be amazing members of our society. Another thing that's not talked about nearly enough, Meredith, is the toll that it takes on the family members, because you're not just incarcerating one person, you're incarcerating the whole family, and how that tears the family apart. And then I don't talk about it a lot because it's a very sensitive subject, but it's very hard to work within the Department of Corrections. You know, it's a big institution, and their number one concern is security. And while you may have staff and administrative people who support your programs, you also have to go through a lot of red tape and a lot of people who don't really want to support programs because we're extra work. And so we're navigating all the time this fine line between pushing to be inside and sensitive to the fact that we're actually guests at the Department of Corrections once we're inside.
I'm getting the feeling, Kathie, that it's a never-ending challenge. It isn't like they welcome you with open arms and say, come on in, you know, come on in and create some good stuff in the prison. It's not quite like that. Can you maybe just quickly, there's a couple of things I really wanted to talk about, which is an upcoming program that you have where, if anybody's out there watching right now, or when they're watching, they can participate, or by coming to the prison. So
yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up. So we're really excited. It's a brand new partnership that we're working with an organization based out of Washington, D.C. called the Frederick Douglass Project for Justice. And the entire program consists of community members coming into either the men or the women's prison in South Florida for a 2-hour visit. So it's a one-time commitment. You sign up with us, and it's on our website, and we'll make sure that you get that information. It's exchangeforchange.org with hyphens in between.
say that again.
Exchange-for-change.org. It's on our landing page. As soon as you go onto our website, you'll see the sign up for the project. You will go in for a 2-hour visit. You'll take a tour of the prison, And then you will sit down with 15 of our incarcerated students and have a conversation. And for those of you familiar with Brian Stevenson, his book, Just Mercy, and his program, it's all about proximity. And it's all about seeing people for who they are. So rather than hear about who an incarcerated person is, or hear and follow the stereotypes that are promoted on media and social media and films and television shows, you'll actually go inside and you will sit side by side in a small group and have a guided 2-hour conversation in a group and then in small groups, and you'll come out and you will be transformed, guaranteed. And then you can talk about it with your friends and family. So we have opportunities every week starting in February for the next 3 months, where up to 15 people can come in per visit, either in the men's prison or the women's prison. All we're asking is to give us an afternoon so that you can experience this yourself. And I guarantee you it will be life-changing.
I believe you completely. I did get to go to some prisons in the past, and one was actually doing a story when I was at WLRN on the women's prison, and some dance therapy. And I remember sitting there in a circle with the women, and I felt that they were changing me more than I was changing them.
Meredith, you're talking about Art Spring, and that
Yes,
was what,
that is
what actually got me into the women's prison as well.
Well, I felt like I was just part of their group, and that something happened to me by being there. So it isn't just that you're doing something for the people in prison, you really are doing something for your own life. And I liked what you said about seeing people as people, because we see people by seeing their flaws. That's how we judge people. And everyone has flaws. And, according to the principles of Brahma Kumaris, that we all have, made mistakes, bigger or maybe less big, in our lives, but not to see people like that, to see people in terms of their potential and their goodness. And I feel like that's what your program is all about. So Kathie, it's just a pleasure to get to interview you. And I didn't mention, I said that she's a seasoned journalist, and I just want to close with the fact that Kathie has been around with the best of the best. ABC and NPR, Time Magazine, who else? ABC, many news organizations, the top news organizations Kathie has worked at as a journalist. And she also lived in Haiti for many, many years, covering the stories of Haiti. So I know the experience that Kathie Klarreich has, as well as the concern for others, wanting to be in places where people really need her help. You wouldn't have spent years in Haiti, I don't think, if you didn't feel like you could do some good as a journalist, which is just so commendable, Kathie. And again, it's exchange for change. And I thank you all. I thank you, Kathie, first, for taking the time to get to be with us. And I thank you all for watching. And I also want to thank Mita, who is our technical director on this program, on most programs on the Brahma Kumaris Facebook site. So thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Meredith.